It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obiuchendo. Thanks a lot for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about something that I know a lot of you Nigerians can relate with. I'm talking electricity, power, or the lack of it. What's going on? What's the situation of things? Why are we still where we are? What's happening going forward?
Big terms like privatization, recapitalization, infrastructural upgrade are thrown around quite often in the power sector. But what really is required is action, isn't it? On Rubbin Minds, we address all the problems bedeviling the power sector, speak on a few strategies to revamp. This is a specialized conversation on electricity. To kickstart the conversation, Ebuka Obiuchendo chats with public affairs analyst Ayo Bankole on Rubbin Minds.
I have you with me, a public analyst who definitely knows a lot about this. Ayo Bankole, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're at least, I want to believe, about 7-8 years since the privatization. I do that because a lot of people are not sure what exactly happened with our substations being privatized and this different sort of the generation and distribution and all of that being privatized. Why are we still having this conversation almost a decade later?
So there's a lot of dynamics to the power issues in Nigeria, and as you said, there are different issues across the value chain. So even though we had a sort of full privatization on the distribution end, we never really concluded on the privatization of the GenCos, that's the generation side. And then the transmission side, it still stays with the government. Yes. So, and the inefficiencies and the wastages happen across the value chain. So we have installed generation capacity of about 12,500, right? But we lose 56% of that. So we're only able to generate about 4,000 or 4,005 or 5,000, right? So there's 56% wastage on that end. On the transmission side, there is total, of course, naturally, government, and mismanagement. So they're unable to manage that. So there's another wastage on that end. Now, the distribution side, what ends at distribution is usually about 3,000 to 3,005. And at the distribution end, per time, they're only able to distribute about 1,500. So until when we have a full deregulation, a full liberalization of that industry. And then there's also the regulation side, there's the national grid side. So no matter how much you're even able to generate, the national grid is only able to manage 5,600 per time. So those inefficiencies are holistic, and you just have to be able to have the political will to drive it all the way down to the end, not just all this facelift of changing names, unbundling. There has to be a systemic liberalization and changing and transformation of that industry to really get the results that we want.
So I get the impression from what you're saying that the wrong end of the value chain was privatized, because transmission seems to be the key to all of this, and government still seems to hold on to it. Why did government refuse to, even the generation side, even if it was bungled at some point, why is transmission still in the hands of government, and why is that important? Okay,
so it's not that the wrong end was privatized. It's just that the privatization was not fully done and it wasn't done properly, right? So government wants to manage transmission, because they believe that that is the end that controls the two ends of the chain, right? But then that is like the spinal cord, right? So you can't leave the spinal cord in the hands of the most inefficient ecosystem in the economy and expect to get results. So now, for you to drive, for transformation that you expect privatization to achieve to really yield the desired results, you have to drive that change across the value chain. So you have large enterprises all over the world that invest in the generation end of power. Even in Nigeria, you have quite a number. And the previous administration had gone through it halfway, right? But political undertones and all that. So everything has been sort of bungled, right? So government needs to set aside political dimensions and do a thorough assessment of who has the capability to manage, power in this type of environment. Because now look at what telecommunication liberalization alone did. Look at the wealth that is generated. Now imagine how much power, how much wealth can be generated using power. And it's so bad that it affects everything that we do economic-wise. And I'll give you an example because I'm an SME person. About 25% of all the SMEs in Nigeria spend more than about 30% or more on power costs as part of their startup costs. That's already about 1/3 of the total amount you are using to enter business. So if you are able to solve this issue, you would have created wealth across different levels, different strata of the economy, and overall, the country is going to do better. So, I mean, we just have to,
We're going to be talking about the SMEs and all of that much later in the show with a few other guests. But I want to talk about the government now, because we all seem to know what the issues are. Yeah. You've outlined them here. A lot of people were excited when the current Minister of Power was put in there. He's also sort of laid out a lot of these things which you say, we know what the issues are. Why is there not that translation to put this in motion? I mean, like you said, the last government, as much as they might not have done things the right way, people at least something was done differently. Why is it taking so long? I mean, we're in our 5th to 6th year of this government. Why does it seem like nothing new has come into that sector?
So it's not that, well, we won't say nothing new, absolutely, but I think what you're trying to say is, why has there not been measurable change? Or, so I've listened to Fashola himself speak a number of times at the Economic Summit and other fora, and he keeps hammering on these sentiments that they are vested interests. And just as Sanusi Lamido said, with vested interests, you keep driving initiatives, you keep pushing initiatives, but you never get the result, because the guys who are supposed to implement all of your changes, or the regulators, the legislators who are supposed to drive changes from the regulatory standpoint, because there are lots of regulations guiding power also that stifle growth, that stifle investment. So all of this end of the chain there has to be the political will to break the grip of those who have vested interest in all of these sectors. There are people who will not benefit if we begin to have power. There are people who will not benefit if laws are changed. So this system is such that the corrupt system has held on to different
You've really
layers.
used the word I was trying to get at.
Yes, so corruption has held on to different layers of the system, and again, quoting the same minister, if you even go through the process of the privatization, a lot of assets were sold to companies that clearly had no capacity to manage those assets or to manage power. So if you do not have a very solid political will to neutralize those vested interests, those corrupt elements and power blocks, and then drive the change to the end. In fact, you are just managing the process.
So are you saying this is an issue that must be tackled from the top, not even a minister issue now?
No, of course, it has to be. I honestly do not know why we should have a president who would be Minister of Petroleum. What are you Minister of Petroleum for, right? When your biggest priority issues are power, education, healthcare, why are you being the minister? It simply means that our priorities are not is business as usual. We still want to sit with the money that is coming from oil and gas. We're not interested in creating alternative sources of wealth.
Let's talk about independent power projects, because those got Nigerians quite excited when that started happening, when licenses were being issued here and there. There was this whole, we're going to start it. We don't all have to depend on PHCN at the time, before the discos took over. What happened with those, and why did they suddenly get not so exciting?
I think I recall that Tinubu, Asiwaju Tinubu was one of those who started the IPP project in Lagos then, and a lot of people got excited. One of the things that killed or that sort of made the noise go down is the national grid issue, right? You can't build an independent power, plant or project with billions of naira, and then you are connecting to the national grid. And at the end of the day, the national grid has limited capability, right? So at the end of the day, whatever effort you've put in place is subjected to the inefficiencies of the national grid. So why not, allow the IPPs run as independent off-grid solution providers? So wherever catchment areas that they are operating at, they don't have to be dependent. You don't have to subject them to your national grid ecosystem. So if I have my IPP within Lekki environment, right, let me be able to provide
service Lekki
exactly to all the guys in Lekki, and without having to bother about the national grid.
Why is that? Why is the national grid? Why is that a law? Is that and how do we start that conversation? Is it a legislation that needs to happen?
Yes, it is a legislation, and again, the regulatory bottlenecks around power, they are very complicated, but that's just one summary of it. The only guys who are able to, and government knows that you need off-grid solutions. And I'll give you an example why I said government knows. There was an initiative that was started in 2015, right? It's called It's called the Energizing Economies Initiative, EEI, and the plan that REA had was to provide power, or clean power, to about 100,000 small businesses, right? And they had continued running that. All of a sudden, there's a pause because the DG or the MD of the REA was changed. So if government knows that the solutions to these things is alternative off-grid power, then we then need the political will to provide the legislation and allow people who understand the business run it, right? Because without that legislation, or without you allowing people to run things outside of the national grid, we're never going to get the results.
Are you saying that capital money isn't the biggest problem with power?
No, capital isn't the biggest problem. There are people who have the money. There are local players, big guys in the oil and gas system, in the oil and gas value chain, who are ready to invest in power because it helps their business, right? There's a lot of gas that they're flaring. They could as well just divert it to generating power, right? There are global players who can come into this market because there's a huge demand, right? Nigeria's electricity demand is about 90,000 megawatts, right? So there's the
90.
Yeah, 90, right? At the minimum, because
and we're at 4.
We're at about 4,000.
Okay, just wanted to be clear with that.
So you can see that the gap is huge. So there is no real investor that wouldn't want to come in once they know that the legislation is right, the political will is right, the system is clean and ready to allow them in. So money is not the problem. In fact, we have the money. The problem is we do not provide the enabling environment, and we do not have the political will.
Yeah. You mentioned there about the national grid, and a lot of people, I mean, I know a lot of people have had that conversation where whatever it is, everything has to be pulled in. Even state governments have complained because some state governments wanted to do that on their own outside of private investments. Why then does it seem like, because sometimes you see people put on social media, we've not had light for 8 weeks or whatever it is, and some other people have power. So how then is the distribution not as even? I'm speaking as a layman now. Everybody pulls power into the national grid. Why isn't that also felt across board?
Yeah, so again, as I said, there are different layers of complexity, but yes. I'll simplify it. So first and foremost, 48% of Nigerians do not have access to electricity at all. So that's on one side. Now, amongst those who have access to electricity, because of the wastages along different lines that I've explained, what you're able to distribute at the end of the day is less than 2,000 or 3,000, right? Now, amongst those guys, there's a product that the discos and these guys call premium electricity. There are different types of products. So the guys who are on the premium side, so for example, you live in service apartments in Lekki and all of that, you have about 24 hours electricity, or you have 12 hours, 6 hours, depends on the product that you're on. So those guys get more power. There are those, and they pay more. There are those who maybe you live wherever you live, and you do not particularly even have the financial wherewithal to pay so much, or you owe, or you bypass, those kind of things, right? You may not necessarily have access to a lot of light. But there's also the corruption element. There are people who connect, there are certain lines that are seen as priority lines, right? So maybe a big man lives here, or the MD of a company lives here, those kind of things, and then you provide them with additional power because, so your
neighbor matters.
Your neighbor matters, and those types of access, right, affects supply to other environments, right? But irrespective, our capacity, our generation and distribution capacity, at the end of the day, irrespective, on the average, is just about 3 hours of electricity per day.
Wow. Before we get to solutions and how we want to move forward, something you mentioned that I know government has talked a lot about is this whole talk about bypassing illegal connections and all of that. Do you get a sense that Nigerians don't take enough responsibility for their actions? We have people who owe bills for years on end and never want to pay. People don't even want meters because they know that getting a meter means they have to be stuck with actually paying these bills. Do we take enough responsibility, you think?
Nigerians do not take enough responsibility, but whose fault is that? I mean, that's the whole idea of the state. That's why the government was formulated, right? All the theories of state, or Besant theory of nature says that, theory of state says that every individual by nature is nasty and brutish and lawless, right? So if the system, the value, our entire value system, which ideally should be driven by the government, is already weak, right? So, and again, don't forget that it is a contract. So the people expect that if I'm able to pay taxes or levies, and I don't like people saying Nigerians don't pay taxes. Nigerians pay taxes. It's just that a lot of them pay informal taxes in form of levies to the government, and these things get cleaned out. For example, the Danfo guys pay a lot of taxes on a daily basis.
It's very heavy.
Right? Yeah, you know, this woman in the store and all that. So if I pay all of these things every day, and then I still don't get light, and then my road is bad, and then my kids can't go to good school, I'm not motivated to want to pay, you know, power bills. So I would look for another way to bypass it, especially if I now see that the disco is cheating me, right? So the entire is a value system problem. It's not so much about do Nigerians take responsibility or not. The problem is why should an average Nigerian want to take responsibility?
Yeah.
You know,
there's no incentive.
Exactly, there's no incentive. So that's what the problem is. Yes, we do not take sufficient responsibility. We like to cut corners, but then, you know, we can only be as good as the system that we've created for ourselves.
So on a final note now, looking at the way this government is set up, looking at we have about 2-3 years, I want to believe, to go. Do you see signs that things are going to change? Let me use your word now. Do you think there's going to be a change, or change is witnessed in this sector anytime soon?
It's not my word. It's the word of the APC. I mean, they were the ones that came up with the change mantra. But I don't see anything changing in 3 years. I mean, I like to stick to results. I'm a strategy person, and I focus on key results. If you look at healthcare, we've not had it better. I don't see how it's going to change in 3 years if it hasn't changed in 5 years. If you look at, I mean, for example, you still have all our major leaders traveling here and there for healthcare. Primary healthcare is not better. Secondary, tertiary is not better. So if you look at road infrastructure, quite a lot is going on there. But Nigerians have the rate of road traffic accidents and all of that is still not. It hasn't dropped, and Nigerians are still not comfortable, right? If you look at the same thing across all parameters, education especially has been ignored. You still have consistent strikes. Power, we just analyzed it, is not going to get better.
But they made promises of, I think, 12,000 megawatts or something.
Okay, so now we already we've analyzed it. We have an installed generation capacity of 12,500 megawatts already, right? The issue is, are we going to get 12,000 in our homes? So that's the issue. So it's not about the fancy.
So it's still the transmission.
Exactly. Issue. So it's still the transmission and, you know, the distribution, you know, the end-to-end transformation of that system. So it's not going to get better. I don't see, except by a stroke of miracle, I don't see us improving significantly in the next 3 years. I mean, that's not going to happen because, I mean, look at what happened with NDDC. It's business as usual. You know, the guys go to work, they allocate monies, you know, they share it. They look at EFCC too, even this EFCC scribe. So I don't see any magic that's going to happen in the next 3 years.
Okay, sometimes we like to end on an optimistic note, but sometimes being realistic, I think, works.
Exactly.
So thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having
me.
me.
We'll take a quick break now, and we'll be right back. Please stay with us.
Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show. Starting a business in Nigeria is super Herculean. But what runs through the minds of a business owner knowing that instead of one less problem, there's one more burden on the business owner, and this is electricity? On Rubbin Minds, we speak with business owners Jessica Henshaw and Elizabeth Mabong.
Welcome back. We're still talking electricity and, of course, power and the effect it has on small and medium enterprises. And I'm here now with two business owners who know a lot about this. Jessica Henshaw, how are you doing today?
Hi,
Elizabeth Mabong. Thanks
yes.
for being here today. Let me start with you now. COVID has been a big conversation, of course, in 2020. A lot of people say that has definitely affected businesses. How much of that compared to what power does would you say has been a bigger problem?
How do I put this? So for a business like mine, so we are a 24 hours food service. And for me, COVID helped my business. I don't know if I would say COVID helped my business, but my business...
People selling food made money, so yes, it definitely helped your business.
My business thrived a lot this period. But the issue of power has...
There's no winning with that one.
There's no winning with it. I mean, from when we started, I would say power was one of our major problems from the inception of our business. And it's so funny, as a business owner, you're thinking of starting a business or growing your business. it's so funny how you have to think about generator cost. You have to factor that in because you cannot rely to any extent on NEPA lights. You just can't. PHC and whatever they are called these days. But I mean, you just can't. So when you're factoring in generator costs, you're also factoring in running it, maintaining it, servicing it. And sometimes this really adds a lot of pressure. Even where do you start? How do you manage it? Things like that. So for me, COVID was nothing compared to what I'm still facing even as at today when it comes to the power.
So people will say there are certain businesses that might not necessarily have issues like that with power. People are thinking you're just cooking, you're not just buying foodstuffs and putting on the pots and taking them out.
Wow, so for us we have shawarma griddles, we have fryers, you need lights to be on. I mean, we run all day. We need at night, preservation. So we have deep freezers, we have fridges, we have vegetables, we have fresh things that need to be kept fresh. And when there's no light or your gen is not working, you have losses, things spoil, things are not fresh. This thing goes so much deeper than people actually assume that food businesses go through, especially like ours, and you need light to operate.
So you definitely need power because you run a printing service. I mean, you're not going to print it with your hand.
Heavily dependent on power.
Very heavily dependent on power.
Even from the order taking process as well, because we take orders across 5 different channels, or 5 different channels, 18 hours, and then the guys in the production work at least 12 to 16 hours a day. Yes. So we need power, basically, and for me that has been my biggest, largest.
The guest we had earlier said something around 40% of sort of revenue.
I heard that.
Or your overhead is sort of channeled.
Mine is 35% of my overheads monthly.
So how does a business survive on that?
Well, so now it's basically, it's almost like that's your constant overhead. I have 4 power sources, 4. 1 diesel generator, 1 petrol generator, and then I must be located in a mall that has a generator, just so that just as backup,
as a buffer,
basically, and then of course the PHC and lights, which
is the real backup of all of you,
which never ever comes, and is the cause of all of these backups, And for us, because the work needs to go on and you don't need hitches, that needs to be in place. So I don't even bother to focus on, so why? It's just to get the solutions.
I mean, something you mentioned there that's very interesting is at the end of the day, you still get the bills. So how does this work? When the bills come and you're wondering, I had power for probably 3 hours a day throughout all of this, how do you address that sort of a situation with the PHC and officials?
Major experience I had when we moved to our second location, and at that time, they told us we'll get our meter in. It was a brand new space, so they told us we'll get our meter in, say, 1 month. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. It took about 8 months for us to get our meter. Now, before the meter came, they were doing the what's the bill they bring monthly? Estimated bill. So now at that time we didn't even have half as much equipment as we do now. So they'll bring bills, and there was a day I was literally ready to fight with the NEPA officials. I'm like, I'm not paying this. You need to explain to me how this bill was generated. They would bring exaggerated bills. Okay, I don't want to pay this bill. Give me my meter. I've paid for a meter. Give me my meter. And this took such a long time. So that back and forth cost us so much, and we were paying, and at the time not making as much as we're making now, but we were spending almost the same amount of money we are spending now on NEPA bills. Also for us now, we seal all our bags before they leave. So it's a thing where we need light 24/7. There's nothing we cannot operate.
Through the entire chain.
We can't operate. We can't do anything without electricity. So we're almost used to not having lights. I think people feel like you living in a certain area in Lagos or Nigeria, whatever, you might have light. Yes, maybe we have light more than some people, but then again, I'm just not dependent on light. I make sure we buy diesel every day, and we have petrol, and like she said, you have a backup gen, you have another gen, and it's a lot.
So I mean, I hear all this and I wonder, is it so your business is doing quite well? I mean, you have 4 sources of power. not someone who's starting off today, who wants to start a business in Nigeria today. Not everybody has that sort of level of success or luxury, to start off that way. So what does a young business owner do if you can't afford a diesel generator and then a petrol generator and then PHCN and sometimes an inverter even? How do I even start? What did you do?
Because it took me a while to get to this point. It also took me a while to decide that, I need 4, if that makes any sense. So it's, I've literally gotten off from my office in the middle of the day to go buy a generator.
Yourself.
So there's just no going on. You have to face it.
Yeah.
And maybe probably just start up as lean as possible.
Yeah.
Like for me, like I said, it's non-negotiable, like being in the mall, because at least it helps.
Yeah.
But if you can't afford it, I honestly don't know.
Yeah. Nigeria is known for having so many unions and all of these things where, there's just a plethora of unions. Most times they're not necessarily effective. But so there's been talks about maybe small businesses need to sort of band together and find a way of presenting their case properly, if it's to government, if it's to the power distribution companies, to sort of say, okay, this is what we're going through. What can be done for us? Do you think that's a viable way to look at this?
So I also think we are more focused on survival than to bother ourselves with as to what do we do, you know? And then honestly, the pressures and all of that probably would not even let people sit. People who are probably more worried about that maybe bigger companies who spend much more. Yeah. But the smaller SMEs, I don't want to say I doubt that they'll come together to be able to do that. But I think we're better off just facing our problems and surviving than going after the government.
What do you think?
For me, I think that the fact that the power sector is now privatized, if that happens where SMEs decide to go to them, they're seeing us as customers. They're not seeing us as Nigerians. Okay, how do we help? They're seeing us as, okay, how this is a form in which we can make more money. So they're seeing us as customers, and I think that's an issue. When this whole privatization thing came, I feel like a lot of people thought it was a better option. For me, I don't believe it was a better option, in the sense that Nigerians are not the most patriotic people. A lot of us are in business primarily to amass as much profit as we can, not to serve, not to provide service, not even what our consumers think of the service we're providing. They just want to make as much profit as possible. So when you hand something that is literally primary for humans' existence, like lights, and give it to a private sector and say, run this, you're giving them a means to generate income for themselves. So, and there's the bodies that are supposed to monitor and regulate these things are also very corrupt. So it's just a thing where they're going to see us as customers, and they're not going to really do anything to help our situation. We're just going to go from fire to fire, go through these different routes to get to the same problem. That's what I think.
Through these COVID times, we saw on TV around the world where governments in several countries were supporting businesses or handing out sort of palliatives, to support especially small businesses. I mean, we heard things in Nigeria. Most people didn't see them, but we heard things. I don't know if you guys got.
I heard.
Okay. So besides COVID, do you feel sort of abandoned by government when you talk about, especially with power? Because it's the one thing I know most businesses just ask government for. Give us this and let us be. We can run this thing on our own. Just give us power. Do you get a sense that you feel like a government on your own?
Yes, because I think at some point it's almost normal for them not to be liked.
Yeah.
So normal. Like, we don't even bother. We just need to get on to the next day. So being disappointed doesn't even help you in any form. So yes, we are, but I doubt that we dwell on that. Yeah. I don't. It's what next.
But then how do we then cross this bridge to get things done and hold people accountable, you think?
So I think this problem is a general problem. I don't think that you can fix the power issue without fixing other things. With everything in Nigeria, corruption or whatever, corruption is a major key. Now, when a lot of people are clamoring for let the youth come and lead, I think that for you to be able to be in power, you have to understand the game of politics. That's why we get so many young people go into power and they're confused. Okay, or you're saying, why is he not doing this? Why is she not doing that? They're not doing anything because they can't. You have to understand how the game is played if you're going to beat them at their own game. You have to also immerse yourself in the game and find a way around it. So I think that if we're going to say, okay, let's have a youth leader, I don't think young people can do it because they don't understand. There's years and years of history in the political game. The people who are there now know what is missing. They've heard us. They know our complaints. They know what they can do to make it better. I don't think it's that they don't know. I don't think it's that they can't hear us. I think it's they're not ready. There's so much politics that goes on with how things are distributed, how things are done, how things are operated. And for that to change, I mean, I really do believe that there has to be someone who can keep a balance.
I want personal stories of maybe moments or times when power has almost brought your business sort of to a close, if at all. If you can remember any situation where you had so much drama with, I don't know, anything around that you just said, you know what, I'm done with this. Did it ever happen? Did it ever happen? I'm sure there's multiple small instances or frustrations where you're just like, wow, again.
So honestly, when my business first started, it was on really shaky grounds. We almost shut down. I was done. And I was done because the first building we got to run from, the landlord had taken money from us, promised us 24 hours lights. We get there, we find out that she has just one generator, and we had blackouts. That building was so bad, there was no light for straight on 1 week. I'm telling you, 6 days, 7 days, no light. Wow. So even if they were running the generator, they would have to shut it down for some time for it to rest, for us to pick up. Now, mind you, I run a 24 hours business, just building my structure, just finding out what works, what to do, what to not do. So I'm going through that, and then this problem just comes in, and it's everything at the same time. So I'm fighting building management, give me light, put on the gen, we need this, we have to do this. So there will be times customers will call in, and we can't even put anything on the fire. We can't do anything. It was a complete halt for me, and that put so much pressure on my business. I lost customers. Obviously nobody wants to call in, and they're always hearing one story or the other, and you have it affected my morale and how I just wanted to let it go. And so for a while that was a huge issue. So for me to leave that building and go to another building, of course there are places where the light situation is better and they're a bit better managed. Okay. So that was what. Yeah,
because I was going to ask, how did you get out of that? So I guess I
had to move into a space where now we are in control of our own light situation. Yeah. Whether NEPA brings light or not, we know that. Prepare your diesel down, prepare your petrol down, and prepare yourself. So
Okay, so just down the road. Our first retail store in Lekki 1, and so we do a lot of fast delivery, so you can order today, you can get it today. But this particular order, I think it was about 200 pieces that was supposed to build to go out that day. They hadn't been light the whole month. So week to week, we kept patching on. So this particular week, the 2 generators refused to come on. 2 of them. And then we had this delivery at 6 p.m. that day, and this was like 1 p.m. We did everything. We did everything up until calling, okay, can we hire a gen to use? And at some point, there was something wrong with the PHCN connection. We did everything. So now, the only option we had at the time was to buy a new generator on the spot. How do you buy a new generator? Like, the value of the job was like maybe 1/4 of the
price of a new generator.
I struggled, like.
So you're caught between keeping your credibility and your
can I just refund this money
and just
and buy? I had to buy the gen. I literally, with a gen, you take time, you decide what kind of gen. Like, how do you just wake up
and buy a generator?
Buy a gen. I had to buy a gen. I had to.
Wow.
With tears.
I hope the gen is still working.
With tears, like I had to buy it,
Heavy. I'm sorry, but so, I mean, you tell all these stories, you've been through these pains, and like you have said, at a point you're just sort of, it becomes your normal, so you even don't complain anymore. Yes. Looking forward, the value of the naira isn't looking great.
Wow.
The taxation issues are becoming crazy. There's a new person knocking at your door every other day with this new bill in your face for you to pay. So there's all of these things happening, and in all of that, of course, there's still no power.
Yeah.
How do you stay optimistic running a business in an environment like this?
So I've had to modify some of our processes. So when we have, so instead of taking orders that you need to do, you know, immediately or same day, we try to extend them a bit, just so that
you have room in case,
you know. But then of course those orders will still come. But even at that, you're still at, okay, be ready to explain to the customer that something may happen. That's the point we're at, because before we're not ready, now we are. Now hindsight would have been, okay, what if this happens? So we're always, you know, it's not a good place to be, but it's almost like telling the customer, you know what, I really can't do it. But then you have to find a balance, and that's basically, so modifying yourself to be able to survive within the system. That's what it is for me.
I think we were raised to suffer. Like, I think from growing up in Nigeria, you're raised to be able to deal with hardship. Honestly, there are things that happen to us now, even in our everyday lives, that are not normal, but we're accustomed to it. For me, I had to survive, I had to eat. This is like, I want to build a life. So whatever it is, this is the environment I'm in, and I'm not doing anything with the hope that something will change. That's the honest truth. And I feel like a lot of us are just trying to figure out things as we go, without the ideology that something might change, because we've waited years and nothing has changed. So what makes you think a new government or a new whatever is going to change anything? So for me, my only hopes are to be able to get through the hurdles, but I have no expectations whatsoever of anything changing.
What about for your business?
How do you mean? Oh, for
optimistic about your business?
Oh no, I mean, with the business I'm in, honestly, with the way we were able to thrive this COVID period, it really, really boosted my morale. I didn't believe that we would get through this COVID phase. So us being able to get through this COVID phase with the light issues, the police issue, the harassment issue, the everything, I mean, that sort of put me on a good path or vibe.
Still optimistic for your business?
Definitely. Just gonna find, yes, you know, just find a more convenient way to, you know, to keep surviving through.
Modifying things
as
you
go along. Definitely inspired. Thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And good luck with everything as you deal with with all the discos in Nigeria. We'll take another break now. We'll be right back. Please don't go away.
We spoke to a few Nigerians on the streets of Lagos, and here's what they had to say about the power situation in their area.
In my area, we are going through a difficult period concerning light. We have been paying bill that we did not consume, not at all.
What's the light situation in your area? Well, let me say it's improving better, more than before.
My brother, the light situation in Nigeria is nothing to write about.
Very good now. That is very stable and very okay now.
We do have lights, night to morning.
At least there is improvement now, like before. Now we used to have light now.
I can say that there's improvement.
The light situation there is not actually good.
In my area, we are going through a difficult period concerning light. We have been paying bill that we did not consume, not at all. So now it's as if we don't even have electricity in this country. We should not be counting such a thing in this country right now.
So how many hours have you been enjoying light? At least if I used to count it, I think it's up to 18.
They are going to count all the hours I have light in a complete week. It will be up to 48 hours.
Like, I want to say like 22 hours. If not 24 hours, yes.
Like this morning, they gave us last night by 10 o'clock or 11 yesterday night, where light was on till I left my house.
Like in my area, in the morning, you know, we see light. If I go to work, I come back in the evening time, I met light.
6 to 7 hours in a day.
2 hours interruption these days. Because like this morning as I was coming out, you know, there was power throughout the night. Then around 7:30 it was off, but then again about 30 minutes ago or after that it was put on. So I think the stability aspect of it is gradually coming to pass.
That is the main problem now. The bill is always high all the time. Just crazy bill all the time.
Like in my own house, where I stay, my own building, we pay like 12,000 naira.
Because people are paying that is heavy bill, and they came up that they said they will give people what they call it prepaid meter. Up to today, nothing.
When bill comes, because why some people were angry with NEPA, because when they did not eat what they're going to pay, they start irritating, getting annoyed. Do you understand me? That's the problem. But if you are eating something and they bring you a bill, they're free to go and pay. Well, they're happy. They eat that food. Do you understand me? That's the problem of Nigeria.
Despite the light issue, they are bringing crazy bill. There's what they call crazy bill, They bring bill of 39,000. When they bring bill of 39,000, formerly they normally read prepaid. They read meters. But nowadays, they don't even read meter. They just come and bring some crazy bill. By the next month, they bring about 40-something thousand again, you understand me? So the bill keep on increasing. But if the light is stable, you understand me? To pay the bill is not the problem.
The billing system, I may not really have the mathematical aspect of it or the calculation aspect of it, but I think it's not bad.
The NEPA bill is much somehow.
At least for electricity, because life is light. We are going nowhere without electricity.
Personal stories from real people on the streets of Lagos, speaking on the power situation in their areas, how it affects them, be it the heavy bills or the inconsistent power situation. Now switching back to Ebuka Obi Uchendu to have the final lap of the power sector conversation with Kende Adegboyega.
Welcome back. Of course, today we're still talking about power, but now we're going to be focusing on solutions, and hopefully we can prefer some for you here today. I'm joined now by Kende Adegboyega. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
We've talked a lot about the problems, and I think everybody in Nigeria knows what the problems are, and we're trying to look forward. Now, first of all, I want to talk about Siemens. We heard about Siemens in the conversation a while ago about how they were going to come in and become the messiah of the power. Do you know, if anything at all, what happened there?
If Siemens is talking about generating power, what about distribution? What about the infrastructure? Even if Siemens will generate the enormous megawatt that we need, who's going to fix the transformers?
Yeah.
So I think we need to work on the infrastructure. So like for instance, you want to ask, what exactly is the DISCO investing in the power sector? So they must be ready to invest, put their money where their mouth is. So if they are not ready to put their money where their mouth is, we may not really get the improvement, but they must be ready. But although the excuse is always that we are not getting enough funds from the system and all that. But we need to move on from where we are to where we need to go. Sincerely, we know that the privatization process was not so open. It's like they sold it to themselves and all that. So the process was not transparent. They didn't really give it out to the right people. So, but if DISCO really want to say, yes, they want to fix their own problem, because most times when you go to power meetings, it's either TN's transmission is blaming DISCO is blaming transmission, and you begin to get those narratives. And at the end of the day, the customer is at the midpoint. I just want power. Yeah. I don't want all those excuses. So, sincerely, the DISCOs need to work on their infrastructure. There are a lot of communities that still buy transformers
on their own.
So, if no ISP will tell me to buy their mass and all that. So, if these things still happen, and also we are talking about metering, a lot of customers don't have access to meter yet, and like for the data that we have now presently is saying that they don't have enough people, that the number of people on the metering, but the DISCOs have legwork people. They have the marketers. At least they should be the people that will get the data that will give their office to say this is the amount of people that we are yet to meter. And they also talk about tariff that is not cost effective. But you are also talking about that a lot of people still bypass meters.
Exactly, yeah.
But you have your guys on the feed. going out to check. And so that means if your guys have been on the field, what have they been checking out? So that means what we are saying is that the discos have to up their game and do their job. And also the regulatory body. The regulatory body is like, what we have seen so far is just like backing. Recently they said this is the, for estimated customers, these are the cap level, this is how much you can give. But we've seen complaints. Even during the lockdown, they supplied outrageous bill to customers. The complaints are still hanging there.
So are you saying, sorry to cut you there, are you saying the privatization process needs to be redone? And are you saying the entire value chain needs to be privatized, like our earlier speaker had said?
Exactly. We need a new power reform. A new power reform bill. What we have now is not working. Like for instance, the states should be able to generate their power. With all this national grid breaking down, their stories...
It's not sustainable.
It's not stories that we should keep hearing. So why should a federal system of government still be running a national grid? So we need to work on the power policy and the bills that we have. They need to reform that bill. The states should be able to generate their own power and sustain. And look at Lagos, for instance. Lagos generates a lot of waste that could be transformed into power.
So we look at a lot of these issues you've talked about, privatization, redoing the power plan. There's a lot of this that needs to be done, but they all seem like very long-term solutions. In the medium to short to medium term, I mean, this government has about 2-3 years to go, like I've said. What can be done in the short to medium term, you think, to make things start looking at least a little positive, optimistic for people?
The first thing we have to do is we need a new power reform bill. We can't, what we have, the privatization bill, even if you are testing something and it's not working, there is need for you to review it. So what we have is not working. So even a CMN magic may not work.
It's not going to work.
So we have to fix that bill that says I cannot generate power and okay, for instance, Lagos wants to collect tax on what business, or what environment, or what profit. So if Lagos as the state is interested in the business that are located in its geographic location, so it should be interested in how those businesses are doing well.
Yep.
So if those businesses are not doing well, they are saying, I need power, I'm not getting the right power. And so you can't be asking me to pay tax for what I'm not earning from. So the state should be responsible to their location, like all other issues too, where you now talk why not trying to divert, even policing. The state, we should have to localize our problem.
Yeah.
We need to localize the solution to our problem. So I believe that power reform bill will, and there's always the threat, we will take the license from the disco. I don't know if we need to take it to solve the problem. So let it
Well,
be.
so be. Well, thank you very much, Kennedy, for being here today. I mean, we all can't wait for these solutions to become realistic and for Nigerians to at least have a bit of an ease to their lives. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us. Like I always say, you can follow us on Twitter at Rubbin Minds Now is our handle. Please tweet at us using the hashtag Rubbin Minds Now. I'll see you next time.
Don't just stand there teasing me.